I was only 15 when I found my mother's body crumpled on the kitchen floor, her neck twisted, blood pooling under her temple, while my stepfather stood over her, claiming she'd slipped. For decades, I carried the weight of his lies, the bruises he left on us both, until I made him confess to her murder. Every chilling word. My revenge took years, but when it came, it was sweeter than I ever imagined. Before I unravel this story, my story, please hit that subscribe button. Every day, I share real confessions of betrayal, courage and justice that hit close to home, stories that remind us the truth always finds a way, no matter how long it takes. My name is Evelyn Thompson, and I'm 72 years old now, living in a quiet suburb just outside Cleveland, Ohio. I was born in 1953, in a time when the world felt simpler, but life was anything but. My mother, Clara, raised me alone after my father died in the Korean War, when I was just a baby. She was a seamstress, her fingers always pricked from needles, working late into the night to mend dresses for wealthier folks in town. We lived in a small clapboard house on Maple Street, with a leaky roof and a garden we tended together. Mom's smile could light up even our darkest days, and I'd do anything to see it, whether it was scrubbing floors or skipping school dances to help her with chores. She was my world, my anchor, and I swore I'd make her proud. When I was 10, Harold came into our lives. A foreman at the steel mill, he had a booming laugh and broad shoulders that made him seem like the answer to our prayers. Mom met him at church, and soon he was fixing our creaky porch, bringing home groceries, and teaching me how to cast a fishing line at the lake. I called him Pop, my heart swelling with hope that we'd finally be a real family. He'd ruffle my hair and say, "Evie, you're my girl now." And I believed him. I trusted him completely, the way a child trusts a parent to keep them safe. Mom seemed happier too, her shoulders less hunched, her laughter more frequent. I thought Harold was our savior. But there were moments, small at first, that made my stomach twist. The way his voice sharpened when Mom forgot to iron his work shirts just so. The way he'd grip her arm a little too tight when he thought I wasn't looking. Once when I was 12, I overheard him snap, "Clara, don't test me," after she asked about money he'd spent at the bar. She brushed it off, telling me, "He's just stressed, Evie. Men get like that." I wanted to believe her, so I did. I threw myself into helping them, taking a job at 14, washing dishes at the diner after school, handing over every dime to keep the lights on. I'd come home exhausted, my hands raw, but I'd see Mom's grateful nod and feel it was worth it. Harold would pat my shoulder, saying, "Good girl, Evie. You're keeping us afloat." I thought that's what family did. Sacrifice, stick together, no matter what. Yet the air in our house grew heavier. Harold's temper flared more often, especially when he'd been drinking. I'd catch Mom hiding a bruise under her scarf, her eyes darting away when I asked about it. "I bumped into the door frame," she'd say, but I knew better. I started lying awake at night, listening for his footsteps, my heart racing at every raised voice. I begged her to leave him, but she'd hug me tight and whisper, "We need him, Evie. He's all we've got." I hated how trapped she felt, how trapped we both felt. And deep down, I was starting to see the truth. Harold wasn't our savior. He was a storm brewing, and we were caught in its path. The air in our house turned sour by the time I was 13, like something rotting beneath the floorboards. Harold's laughter, once warm and booming, became a mask for his rage, and my mother's soft smiles faded under the weight of his fists. I tried to shield her, to keep our family whole, but the harder I fought, the more I saw the monster he truly was, and the closer we crept toward the night that would break us forever. By 1966, I was 13, balancing school and a part-time job, scrubbing dishes at Millie's Diner to help Mom keep the bills paid. Our little house on Maple Street felt smaller every day, the walls closing in as Harold's temper grew. He was still the foreman at the steel mill, respected in town, always quick with a grin for neighbors like Mrs. Larson next door or Pastor Jim at church. But behind our faded curtains, he was different. The whiskey bottles piled up in the kitchen, their sharp smell clinging to him when he stumbled home late. At first, his anger was just words. Cutting, cruel words that sliced through Mom's spirit. "Clara, you're useless." He'd sneer if dinner was late or, "You think you're better than me?" When she dared speak up, I'd watch her shrink, her hands trembling as she cleared his plate, and I'd feel a knot tighten in my chest. I started noticing the bruises when I was 14. A purple mark on her wrist, hidden under her sleeve. A faint shadow on her cheek, covered with powder. "It's nothing, Evie," she'd say, her voice thin as paper. "I'm clumsy, that's all." But I wasn't a child anymore. I saw how she flinched when Harold raised his hand, how she'd hurry to please him, like a dog scared of the whip. One night I caught him grabbing her arm in the living room, his fingers digging in as he hissed, "Don't talk back to me." "Clara!" I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding, wanting to scream but too scared to move. When he let go, she crumpled onto the couch, and he stormed out to the garage. I ran to her, whispering, "Mom, we have to leave. He's gonna hurt you worse." She pulled me close, her breath shaky, and said, "Evie, we can't. He pays the rent. He's all we've got." Her words burned, not because they were true, but because she believed them. I threw myself into saving us. At 15, I dropped out of high school, lying about my age to take a full-time job at the diner. My hands were raw from hot water and grease, my back aching from hours on my feet. But every dollar went to Mom. I thought if I could earn enough, we could escape. Rent a little apartment, just the two of us. I'd slip my paychecks into her purse, begging her to save them. "We'll get out, Mom," I'd say, my voice fierce with hope. But she'd just smile sadly, her eyes distant, and murmur, "Soon, Evie, soon." I didn't know then that Harold was taking the money, spending it on whiskey and card games at the bar. All my sacrifices, all my dreams of freedom, were slipping through his fingers. The neighbors saw pieces of it. Mrs. Larson, who'd bring us zucchini from her garden, once asked Mom about a bruise on her neck. "Oh, I fell off the porch," Mom lied, her laugh forced. Mrs. Larson's eyes narrowed, but she didn't push. Pastor Jim pulled me aside after church one Sunday, his voice gentle. "Evelyn, is everything all right at home?" I wanted to scream the truth, but Harold was right there, shaking hands with the deacon, his arm around Mom like he was the perfect husband. I mumbled, "Everything's fine," and hated myself for it. The silence was suffocating, like we were all trapped in a lie nobody dared to break. Harold's abuse grew bolder. One evening I came home from the diner to find Mom in the kitchen, her lips split, a dish shattered on the floor. Harold was in his armchair sipping a beer, calm as you please. "She dropped it," he said, not even looking at me. I knelt beside her, my hands shaking as I helped her clean up. "Mom, please," I whispered. "We can go to the police." But she shook her head, tears falling. "He'd find us, Evie, and he'd make it worse." That night, I lay awake listening to the creak of the house, imagining ways to make him stop, hiding his bottles, stealing his keys, anything to protect her. But I was just a girl, and he was a mountain of a man, his shadow looming over us both. The worst came one humid summer night in 1967, when I was 15. I'd worked a double shift, my feet throbbing, and walked home through a drizzle that soaked my uniform. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. I found Mom in the bedroom, curled up on the bed, her face swollen, one eye blackened. Harold was passed out on the couch, an empty bottle beside him. "He didn't mean it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He just got mad about the bills." I held her, my tears mixing with hers, and made a vow. I'd find a way to get us out, no matter what it took. But deep down, I felt the truth closing in, that we were running out of time. and Harold's rage was a storm about to break us. If you're still with me, don't miss what's coming next. The night that changed everything, and the moment I knew I'd never forgive him. Subscribe and stay tuned, because this story isn't just about pain. It's about fighting back when the world expects you to stay silent. The storm hit Cleveland hard that November evening, rain hammering the roof of our little house on Maple Street. I was 15, trudging home from a late shift at Millie's Diner, my apron still damp with grease, my bones weary from standing all day. I'd been saving every penny, dreaming of a day Mom and I could escape Harold's grip. But as I pushed open the front door, the silence hit me like a slap. None of the usual clatter of dishes or hum of Mom's radio, just the low howl of wind and the creak of the house. My stomach twisted as I called out, "Mom, you there?" No answer. I stepped into the kitchen and froze. There she was, my mother, crumpled on the linoleum, her neck bent wrong, a thin trickle of blood pooling under her temple. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing, and her face, God, her face was a map of bruises, fresh ones blooming over faded ones I'd seen too many times. Harold stood by the sink, a beer in his hand, his knuckles red and raw. His flannel shirt was untucked, his face flushed from whiskey. "She slipped," he said, his voice flat, like he was reading a script. "Tripped on the wet floor after mouthing off. Clumsy woman." I dropped to my knees beside her, my hands shaking as I touched her cold cheek. "Mom, wake up," I whispered, but she didn't move. I saw the marks on her arms, his fingerprints, stark against her pale skin. I looked up at him, my voice trembling. "You did this. You hurt her." He stepped closer, towering over me, his breath sour. "Watch your mouth, Evie," he growled. "You didn't see nothing. Say otherwise, and you'll regret it." Fear choked me, but so did rage. I wanted to scream, to claw at him. But I was just a girl, and he was a wall of menace. The police came quickly. Too quickly, I'd realize later. Harold's buddy from the mill, Officer Daniels, was first on the scene. He took one look at Mom, then at Harold, and nodded like they'd already settled the story. "Tragic accident," Daniels said, scribbling in his notebook. "Slipped during the storm, hit her head." I tried to speak, to tell them about the bruises, the years of his fists. But Harold's eyes bored into me, and my voice caught in my throat. "She was clumsy," he said again, his arm around me like a vice at the funeral a week later. Neighbors patted his back, saying, "Poor Harold." Raising Evelyn alone now, I stood by her coffin, my hands clenched, staring at the powder covering the bruise on her cheek. They couldn't quite hide. Mrs. Lawson from next door hugged me, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Evie." But no one asked the questions I was screaming inside. They saw what Harold wanted them to see. A grieving widower, not a murderer. I lived with him for 3 more years, every day a nightmare. He'd watch me like a hawk, his voice low and threatening. "Keep quiet, Evie, or you'll end up in a foster home. Or worse." I'd lie awake at night, replaying that night, my guilt like a blade. Why didn't I fight harder? Why didn't I drag her out of that house? At 18, I couldn't take it anymore. I married Tommy, a kind boy from the diner who loved me despite my shadows. We moved to Akron, started a family. 2 kids, a modest home. But even as I built a new life, Mom's eyes haunted me. Every bruise I'd hidden, every plea I'd ignored, burned in my memory. I'd wake up gasping, dreaming of her falling, of Harold's hands on her. I told myself I'd moved on, but deep down, I knew I was running. From him, from the truth, from the girl who'd failed her mother. Years passed, and I buried the pain under birthday parties and soccer games. But every time I saw a news story about a woman hurt, or heard a man raise his voice, it was like I was 15 again, kneeling on that kitchen floor. Harold was still out there, living in that same house, collecting his pension, bragging about his lost family. To anyone who'd listen, the injustice gnawed at me, a slow poison. By the time I was 60, widowed and with my kids grown. I couldn't run anymore. The guilt, the rage, it was all still there, waiting for me to face it. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing. Harold's lie wouldn't bury my mother's truth forever. By 2013, I was a widow, my husband Tommy gone from cancer, my kids grown with lives of their own. Our little house in Akron felt too quiet, and the silence let the memories creep in. Mom's lifeless body on the kitchen floor, Harold's cold lie. She slipped. I'd spent years trying to bury it, focusing on raising my daughter, Sarah, and son, Michael, giving them the love Mom gave me. But at night, when the world was still, her face haunted me. Her bruised cheek, her empty eyes. I'd wake up gasping, my heart pounding with the same question. Why didn't I fight for her? Now at 60, with my kids independent and my days my own, the guilt was unbearable. I couldn't let Harold live out his days as the good man everyone thought he was. The spark came one gray afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the attic. I found a small, tattered diary tucked inside Mom's sewing kit. Its pages yellowed, but her handwriting unmistakable. "Harold's temper worsens," she wrote in 1967. "He grabbed my arm today, said if I leave, he'll take Evie from me. I'm scared, but what can I do?" My hands shook as I read, tears blurring the ink. Another entry, months later. "Evie works so hard, gives me every penny. I hide some away, but Harold finds it. God forgive me for staying." She'd been trapped, just like I'd feared. Her love for me chaining her to that monster. That diary was a map to the truth, and I knew it was time to act. I started digging, quietly at first. I drove to Cleveland, visited the library, and requested old police reports from 1968. The official record was thin. Just a paragraph calling Mom's death an accident, signed by Officer Daniels, Harold's old drinking buddy. But I remembered Mrs. Larson, our neighbor, who'd seen Mom's bruises. She was in her 80s now, living in a nursing home nearby. I sat with her one afternoon, her hands frail but her memory sharp. "Clara was scared, Evie," she said, her voice trembling. I saw the marks, heard the yelling. I should have done more. Her guilt mirrored mine, but her words were gold. A witness who'd seen Harold's cruelty. I tracked down another neighbor, Mr. Perry, who'd moved to Toledo. Over coffee, he admitted. We all suspected, but Harold had the town fooled. He was charming when he wanted to be. Each piece fueled my resolve. I scoured online forums, learning about cold cases, and found a retired detective, Sam Carver, who'd worked in Cleveland in the 70s. I called him, pretending to be a curious historian, and asked about Mom's case. "That one never sat right," he admitted. "Daniels rushed it, and Harold had friends in high places. If there's new evidence, the case could reopen." New evidence. That's what I needed. Mom's diary, Mrs. Larson's testimony, and my own memories weren't enough. I needed Harold to admit what he'd done, and I'd have to face him to get it. The idea of seeing him again made my stomach churn. He was 82 now, still in that same house on Maple Street, living off his pension, probably still spinning his lies. I spent weeks wrestling with it, my heart torn between fear and fury. Could I look into his eyes without breaking? Could I trick the man who'd terrified me as a child? I confided in Sarah, my daughter, who hugged me tight and said, "Mom, you're the strongest person I know. Do this for Grandma." Her words steadied me. I bought a small digital recorder online, tested it in my kitchen until I knew it worked. I practiced my story, how I'd play the remorseful stepdaughter, wanting to reconnect, hiding my real purpose. I'd get him talking, get him drinking, and get the truth. Every night I read Mom's diary, her words a fire in my chest. I saw her sacrifices, working double shifts, hiding her pain to keep me safe, and my own, dropping out of school, scrubbing dishes to save us. Harold had stolen her life, my childhood, and decades of peace. I wasn't just fighting for Mom. I was fighting for the girl I'd been, the one who'd believed in family, who'd trusted him until he broke us. I thought about what I'd say, how I'd keep my voice steady. "Pop, I miss Mom." I rehearsed, imagining his smug face. "Tell me about that night." I'd let his ego and whiskey do the rest. The morning I decided to go, I stood in front of my mirror, my gray hair pulled back, my hands steady despite the nerves. I packed the recorder, Mom's diary, and a photo of her smiling. The one from before Harold. I drove the 2 hours to Cleveland, the familiar streets tightening my chest. Maple Street looked smaller, the house shabbier, but it was still his. As I parked, my heart pounded like it did when I was 15, walking into that kitchen. But this time, I wasn't a scared girl. I was a woman with a plan, ready to face the monster who'd taken everything. I knocked on his door, my recorder hidden in my pocket, and when he opened it, I forced a smile. "Pop?" I said, my voice soft. "It's been too long." Standing on Harold's porch that crisp morning in 2013, I felt the weight of Mom's diary in my purse, her words urging me forward. When he opened the door, his frame was frailer, his hair thin and white. But those cold eyes hadn't changed. "Evie?" he rasped, squinting. "What are you doing here?" I forced a smile, my heart hammering as I slipped my hand into my pocket, switching on the recorder. "Pop, I've been thinking about Mom," I said, my voice soft, practiced. "I miss her. Can we talk?" He grunted, suspicious, but waved me inside. The house smelled of stale coffee and dust, the same kitchen table where I'd eaten with Mom now cluttered with empty bottles. I sat, clutching her photo in my mind, and started my act. I played the grieving stepdaughter perfectly, tears welling as I talked about Mom. Her laugh, her sewing, how I wished I'd had more time with her. Harold sipped his coffee, his guard lowering. "Clara was a good woman," he said, his voice gruff but smug, like he'd earned her memory. I poured him whiskey from the bottle on the counter, his old vice, saying, "To Mom." He didn't hesitate, downing it fast. After the second glass, his tongue loosened. "She was always so damn stubborn," he muttered. I leaned in, my pulse racing. "What happened that night, Pop? The night she died? I keep dreaming about it." My voice cracked, real pain mixing with the ruse. He stared at the table, his fingers tightening around the glass. "She wouldn't shut up," he slurred, his eyes distant, always nagging. About money, about you, about leaving. I'd had enough, pushed her harder than I meant, and she hit the floor, didn't get up. My breath caught, but I kept my face soft, nodding like I understood. "So it was an accident?" I asked, gentle as a breeze. He smirked, a sick glint in his eye. "She had it coming, Evie. You know how she was." Every word was a knife, but I stayed calm, the recorder catching it all. I poured him another drink, asking small questions, letting his ego spill the truth. "You never told anyone?" I whispered. "Nah," he said, chuckling. "Cops were my pals. Case closed." I felt sick but victorious. I had him. I left that house with his confession burning in my pocket. The next day, I drove to the Cleveland cold case unit, my hands steady as I handed over the recording, Mom's diary, and a letter detailing Mrs. Larson's and Mr. Perry's accounts. I didn't give my name at first, just said I was a concerned citizen. The detective, a young woman with sharp eyes, listened to the tape, her jaw tightening. "This changes everything," she said. They reopened the case quietly, exhuming Mom's body for a new autopsy. The results were clear: blunt force trauma, inconsistent with a fall. Harold was arrested a month later, his face pale as they cuffed him in that same kitchen. He screamed denials, but the evidence was ironclad. My recording, the diary, witness statements, and the autopsy. The trial was swift, the town buzzing with shock. Harold Thompson, the nice widower. They whispered. The local paper ran the story. Foreman convicted in decades-old murder. He was sentenced to life, his reputation in ashes. He died in prison 2 years later, alone. No one to mourn him. The day I heard he was gone, I sat in my garden, Mom's photo in my hands. I didn't feel joy, but a quiet peace, like a door finally closing. I'd spent so long blaming myself for not saving her, for staying silent, but facing Harold, turning his own words against him, gave me back the girl I'd been, the one who'd loved Mom fiercely. I visited her grave, laying daisies, her favorite, on the stone. "I did it, Mom," I whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore." My kids, Sarah and Michael, hugged me tight when I told them, proud of their mom who'd fought for justice. Looking back, I see the strength it took, not just to confront him, but to live with the pain all those years. To everyone listening, especially those of us who've seen decades pass, know this: your voice matters. No matter how long it's been silent, justice doesn't expire, and neither does your worth. If someone's taken your dignity, your love, your family, fight for them. You're stronger than you know, and it's never too late to make things right. Hit that subscribe button if this story moved you, because I'll keep sharing tales of resilience and truth for all of us who have carried heavy burdens and still found the courage to stand tall.